Berlin, Germany, September 10th, 2025. The German capital was the stage for urgent warnings on Wednesday evening as Chancellor Friedrich Merz delivered one of his strongest condemnations yet of Russian military behavior in Europe. The trigger was the latest in a series of alarming escalations, multiple Russian combat drones breaching Polish airspace in what leaders in both Warsaw and Berlin described as an unmistakable threat to peace across the continent. Chancellor Friedrich Merz stood before reporters with a measured but unmistakably firm tone. He aligned himself with the assessment of Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk, stressing that the incident was not merely an accident, but part of a broader, deliberate pattern. Merz said he shared Tusk's assessment that this is a serious threat to peace throughout Europe. He further added that he agreed with the Polish leader's rejection of Moscow's explanation. The Russian claim that this was a coincidence or an oversight is not credible. These words signalled not only solidarity with Poland, NATO's frontline state, but also a warning to the European Union that complacency could have dire consequences. The drone intrusion came amid weeks of heightened military activity across the Baltic region and along NATO's eastern border. Poland, already bearing the brunt of spillover threats from Russia's war in Ukraine, has been pressing its allies for stronger security guarantees. Merz, who only recently assumed the chancellorship, placed the event within this broader arc of provocations. Friedrich Merz, German Chancellor. Russia has seriously endangered human lives in Poland, a country that is a member of NATO and a member of the European Union. This completely reckless action by the Russian government is part of a very long chain of provocations that we have been seeing for months in the Baltic Sea region and on NATO's eastern flank as a whole. The German government condemns this aggressive behavior by Russia in the strongest possible terms. This direct language underscored Berlin's growing willingness to echo Warsaw's concerns more forcefully. Where past German governments had often sought a balancing act with Moscow, Merz's message was one of uncompromising denunciation. The Chancellor's words were not spoken in isolation. His statement echoed the mood across much of Europe, where leaders increasingly view Russian drone and missile incidents as deliberate attempts to test the alliance's resolve. Over the last months, incidents ranging from naval provocations in the Baltic to incursions of drones near NATO airspace have piled up. Each has chipped away at the idea that Russia might still respect the boundaries of NATO members, particularly those bordering Ukraine. Merz emphasized that this was not a one-off mistake. This completely reckless action by the Russian government is part of a very long chain of provocations. That framing matters. By calling it a chain, Merz is signaling continuity, not coincidence, a series of steps designed to wear down NATO unity and probe for weaknesses. What should Europe do in the face of these provocations? For Merz, the answer begins with urgent discussions within NATO and the European Union. He noted bluntly, "We will now have to discuss the consequences again." Those discussions, he suggested, would not only focus on sanctions or political statements, but also on the practical questions of defence readiness and deterrence. Merz turned attention to NATO's defences, which, while functioning, had not delivered the level of protection he believed necessary. Friedrich Merz, German Chancellor, "We will now have to discuss the consequences again. I would first like to state that European air defence, NATO air defence, worked, but of course not as well as it should have worked to prevent such a large number of drones from entering Polish airspace early enough and to engage the objects early enough. This candid acknowledgement that NATO defences worked but fell short is rare for a sitting German Chancellor. It reflects both transparency and urgency. By highlighting shortcomings, Merz placed pressure on allies to accelerate long-discussed plans for a more integrated European air defence system. The incident has also become a political test of unity. As Europe prepares for critical summits on defence and security, leaders face the challenge of showing Moscow that NATO's collective defence commitments are not just words on paper. Poland has long warned that Russian provocations are designed to sow doubt about NATO's credibility. Wednesday's events appear to confirm those warnings. Merz's response attempted to bridge Warsaw's sense of immediate danger with Berlin's traditionally more cautious approach. By using the strongest possible language of condemnation and admitting weaknesses in Europe's defences, he signalled that Germany is prepared to lean further into Poland's security concerns. The Chancellor's remarks also mark a notable shift in German rhetoric. Previous governments often emphasised dialogue with Moscow, even in times of tension. Merz, however, framed the drone incident squarely as an act of aggression. He reiterated the German government condemns this aggressive behavior by Russia in the strongest possible terms. For many in Germany and beyond, this statement reflects a recognition that dialogue alone cannot address the scale of Russian provocations. Berlin, long criticized for hesitancy in defense matters, is now being forced to adopt a firmer posture. Perhaps the most striking portion of Merz's remarks was his focus on air defense. He pointed out that while NATO systems had detected and responded to the drone intrusion, the sheer volume of unmanned aircraft overwhelmed early interception efforts. Friedrich Merz, German Chancellor, we will now have to discuss the consequences of this once again. I would first like to note that European air defense, NATO air defense worked, but of course not as well as it should have worked, to prevent such a large number of drones from entering Polish airspace early enough and to engage the targets early enough. This statement exposes a vulnerability that military analysts have warned of. Europe's current air defense capabilities, though improved, remain fragmented. Systems vary by country and coordination is not always seamless. Russia's use of swarms of drones has increasingly exploited these gaps. Beyond military readiness, Merz's remarks also spoke to the broader theme of European unity. By standing alongside Donald Tusk's warnings and rejecting Moscow's explanations, Berlin positioned itself firmly within the camp of frontline states demanding urgent action. The Chancellor's decision to echo Tusk's words almost verbatim, that the Russian claim of coincidence is not credible, was a deliberate signal. It conveyed that Germany, the EU's largest economy and a central NATO member, would not water down Polish concerns but instead elevate them. As NATO prepares to meet in coming weeks, the consequences Merz spoke of will likely involve both technical and political measures. These could include bolstering Poland's air defences, accelerating joint procurement of missile defence systems, and reinforcing deterrence messaging toward Moscow. The Chancellor's words suggest he expects tangible improvements, not merely rhetorical solidarity. His acknowledgement that the air defence worked, but not as well as it should have, leaves little room for complacency. For Russia, the message is equally clear. Europe recognises the pattern, is documenting it, and is preparing responses that go beyond condemnation. In Berlin, Friedrich Merz's statements carried a weight that went beyond the immediate crisis. They revealed a chancellor stepping more firmly into the role of Europe's defender, aligning closely with Poland and publicly challenging NATO to improve its defences. His words, "Russia has seriously endangered human lives in Poland. The German government condemns this aggressive behaviour by Russia in the strongest possible terms," will likely reverberate in upcoming debates, not just in Brussels, but also in Washington. For ordinary Europeans, Wednesday's press conference was a stark reminder that the war in Ukraine and Russian provocations are not distant conflicts. They are immediate, present threats, flying across borders, testing radars, and forcing Europe to confront the fragility of its peace. Merz closed with a recognition that while NATO had acted, it must do better. In his blunt assessment that the system worked, but not as well as it should have, he summarised both the progress made and the urgent work still to come. As Europe stands on edge, one message from Berlin was unmistakable: the reckless actions of Russia will not go unanswered.